Brief introduction to Part 1. For 10 years, Lyra lived in shadows, pretending to be a mute servant girl, to hide her true identity as heir to the Northern Crescent Pack. Her grandmother's warning and silver pendant were all that remained of her heritage. During a pack celebration, the Alpha King Kieran noticed her and, sensing her secret, brought her to his palace of Black Crest. Through manipulation and persistence, he finally broke her decade of silence, revealing she possessed a rare and powerful Luna voice that could command wolves across territories. Lyra confessed she had hidden to escape Damon, the Northern Alpha who destroyed her pack and hunts any remaining heirs. In the ancient chamber beneath Black Crest, Kieran offered Lyra protection and a chance to reclaim her birthright by standing with him as Luna Queen. She accepted, ready to step into her destiny and end her years of hiding. The morning light spilled through the ornate windows of my new chambers in the east wing of Black Crest. No longer a guest or prisoner, but something else entirely. Something I was still struggling to define. 3 days had passed since I'd broken my silence in the chamber of the Moonstone, since I'd spoken my first words in 10 years to Kieran, the Alpha King. My voice still felt foreign to me, like a muscle long atrophied suddenly called into use. Each word carried weight, resonated with power I'd spent a decade suppressing. Sometimes I caught myself falling back into silence, communicating with gestures and nods as I'd done for so long. Old habits, Kieran had said yesterday, catching me mid-gesture at breakfast. They'll fade with time. Time was something I wasn't certain we had. Damon, the Northern Alpha who'd destroyed my pack and hunted my bloodline, had been at that celebration. He'd seen me, even if he hadn't recognized the servant girl as the missing heir to the Northern Crescent Pack. I touched the silver pendant at my throat, the wolf howling at the crescent moon, my grandmother's final gift, a reminder of who I was meant to be. A sharp knock interrupted my thoughts. "Enter," I said, still marveling at the sound of my own voice. Helena, Kieran's austere housekeeper, appeared in the doorway. Her silver-streaked hair pulled back in its usual severe bun, her expression carefully neutral. "His Majesty requests your presence in the training grounds," she said, her eyes flickering briefly to the pendant at my throat. Immediately. Training grounds? A flutter of anxiety swept through me. I hadn't shifted in 10 years, hadn't allowed my wolf that freedom since the night my grandmother smuggled me away from our burning territory. "I'll be right there," I said, forcing confidence into my tone. Helena nodded once and withdrew, leaving me to change into the clothes laid out for me. Fitted black leggings, a deep blue tunic, and soft leather boots. Practical clothing. Nothing like the fine dresses delivered to my rooms each morning that I'd refused to wear. The corridors of Black Crest were still a labyrinth to me, but I was learning. Left at the portrait gallery, down the grand staircase, through the western hall with its ceiling of painted stars. The palace staff watched me from the corners of their eyes as I passed, curious about the girl who'd arrived as a silent servant and was now being treated as something approaching royalty. The whispers followed me everywhere. Luna voice, Northern heir, the Alpha King's chosen. The training grounds were a vast expanse beyond the formal gardens, ringed by ancient pines that stretched toward the sky like sentinels. A large clearing of packed earth at the center bore the marks of countless training sessions, claw marks in the dirt, the occasional scorch of what might have been ceremonial fire. Kieran stood at the center, his back to me as I approached. He wore simple black training clothes that did nothing to diminish the aura of power that surrounded him. Even without his silver circlet, there was no mistaking him for anything but what he was. The Alpha King, ruler of all 7 territories. He turned as I approached, those storm-gray eyes finding mine immediately. Something electric passed between us, as it had since that first moment in the celebration hall. A recognition, a connection I couldn't explain and didn't entirely trust. "You came," he said, a hint of approval in his tone. Did I have a choice? The words slipped out before I could stop them, remnants of the defiance I'd cultivated in silence for years. The corner of his mouth lifted. "There's always a choice, little wolf, even when it doesn't feel like it." Around us, I realized we weren't alone. Warriors trained in pairs along the perimeter, their movements a deadly dance of claws and fangs as they shifted between human and wolf form, with practiced ease. I recognized a few faces from my arrival at the palace. Kieran's elite guard. "Why am I here?" I asked, keeping my voice low. Kieran circled me slowly, his gaze assessing. "You haven't shifted in 10 years. Your wolf is starved, caged, desperate. You can feel her, can't you? Scratching at the surface, begging for release." I could. The constant ache beneath my skin, the restlessness that never quite subsided, the dreams of running free that left me gasping in the dark. "It's not safe," I whispered. "Nothing worthwhile ever is," he countered. "But you can't reclaim your birthright as a half-self, Lyra. The Northern Crescent Pack won't follow a Luna who fears her own wolf." "The Northern Crescent Pack is shattered," I said bitterly. "Its survivors scattered or dead. Not all." His voice dropped to a murmur. "There are whispers in the eastern mountains. Wolves who still bear the crescent mark, who remember the old ways, who wait for a true Luna to call them home." Hope flared in my chest, quickly dampened by fear. Damon rules through terror, not loyalty," Kieran interrupted. "His hold is weaker than he lets the world believe. But before we can challenge him, you need to become whole again." He gestured to the clearing. "Your wolf has been patient for 10 years. It's time to let her run." Panic surged through me. "Here? Now? I can't." "You can." His voice carried the faintest hint of alpha command, not enough to force obedience, but enough to compel attention. "And you will. Unless you intend to live in fear forever." I clenched my fists, anger replacing fear. "You don't understand what it's like to lose everything, to live knowing that one wrong move, one slip of control could mean death." "Don't I?" He pulled aside the collar of his training shirt, revealing a jagged scar that ran from his collarbone down beneath the fabric, far more extensive than the facial scar I'd noticed when we first met. "I was 17 when assassins from the Southern Territories infiltrated the palace. They killed my father, my mother, my younger sister. I survived only because my wolf refused to die, refused to surrender even when my human half had given up." He released the collar, concealing the scar once more. "We all carry wounds, Lyra. The question is whether we let them define us." The weight of his words settled over me. 10 years of hiding, of denial, of half-existence. What had it gained me? Safety, yes, but at what cost? My identity, my heritage, my power, all suppressed in the name of survival. "I don't know if I remember how," I admitted, my voice barely audible. Kieran stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the heat radiating from his skin. "Your wolf remembers. Trust her." He reached out, his fingers brushing against the pendant at my throat. "The crescent moon returns to its rightful place," he murmured, echoing his words from the chamber of the moonstone. "But first, you must return to yourself." I closed my eyes, reaching inward to the place where my wolf had waited patiently for a decade. She stirred, eager and wary all at once. How long had I denied her the moonlight, the forest, the freedom that was her birthright? "I'll be right here," Kieran promised, stepping back to give me space. Drawing a deep breath, I surrendered to the transformation I'd fought for so long. Pain lanced through me as bones shifted, muscles stretched, skin gave way to fur. I fell to my knees, a cry escaping my lips, the first sound my wolf had made in 10 years. The world exploded into sensation. Scents, sounds, colors all intensified until I thought I might drown in them. The shift felt endless, my body remembering a dance it had performed only once before, on the night my grandmother and I fled the burning remnants of our pack. Then suddenly, gloriously, it was complete. I stood on 4 paws, my white fur gleaming in the morning light. The world looked different through wolf eyes, sharper, clearer, more immediate. I could hear the heartbeats of the warriors around the perimeter, could smell the rich loam beneath my paws, and the faint trace of snow on the distant peaks. Most of all, I could sense Kieran. His presence was overwhelming, a storm of power and authority that should have sent me cowering. Instead, my wolf was drawn to him, recognizing something my human half was still reluctant to acknowledge. "Beautiful," he murmured, kneeling before me with none of the artifice of kingship, just pure wonder in his eyes. A white wolf with the crescent mark. The legends were true. I turned my head, confused, and caught sight of my reflection in a small training pool nearby. There, on my shoulder, a patch of silver fur formed a perfect crescent moon, a mark I'd never known I carried, visible only in wolf form. The mark of the true Luna of the Northern Crescent Pack. For the first time in 10 years, I felt whole. The wolf and the girl no longer at odds, but united in purpose. In that moment of clarity, I knew Kieran was right. I couldn't reclaim my birthright as a half-self. I needed my wolf as much as she needed me. A low growl rumbled in my throat. Not a threat, but a greeting. Kieran's eyes widened fractionally, then gleamed with something like triumph. He straightened, every inch the Alpha King once more. "Now," he said, "we begin." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of training, learning, and transformation. Each day, Kieran pushed me further, testing the limits of my strength, speed, and endurance in both human and wolf form. Each night, I collapsed into bed, muscles aching, mind reeling with new knowledge about the royal territory, the politics of the 7 packs, and my own abilities. My Luna voice grew stronger with use. What had started as a hoarse whisper after 10 years of silence blossomed into something powerful enough to command attention from every wolf in hearing range. Kieran taught me to modulate it, to direct it, to infuse it with authority without relying on brute force as Alpha commands did. A Luna's power lies in harmony, not dominance, he explained one evening as we sat in his private study, ancient texts spread before us. You don't override a wolf's will, you speak to something deeper, their instincts, their connection to the moon and forest. I traced my finger over an illuminated manuscript depicting a white wolf with a silver crescent mark, an image unsettlingly similar to my own wolf form. Is that why Luna Queens are so rare? Because the voice requires a different kind of power? Kieran nodded, his expression thoughtful. Partly, but also because true Lunas are born, not made. The bloodlines were carefully protected, passed down through generations. His eyes met mine. Your grandmother was the last recognized Luna Queen. When the Northern Crescent Pack fell, many believed the bloodline lost forever. Until now, I murmured. Until now, he agreed, though Damon will do everything in his power to ensure you never take your rightful place. Damon. The Northern Alpha who had destroyed my pack, murdered countless wolves loyal to my family, and continued to hunt any remaining heirs. The threat of him loomed over everything, a shadow I couldn't escape. What exactly happened? I asked, the question that had burned inside me for years. My grandmother never told me the full story of how our pack fell, only that we had to run, had to hide. Kieran's expression darkened. Your grandmother Ara was Luna Queen to Alpha Thorn, your grandfather. They ruled the Northern Crescent Pack for nearly 30 years, one of the strongest alliances in recent memory. Their daughter, your mother, was expected to continue the bloodline, to mate with a worthy Alpha and maintain the Luna heritage. But she fell in love with a common wolf, I said, recalling fragments of what my grandmother had told me. My father. Not quite common, Kieran corrected. Your father was a warrior of the Eastern Ridge Pack, sent as an emissary to strengthen ties between the territories. A respected wolf, but not an alpha, not the political match your mother was expected to make. My fingers tightened around the pendant at my throat. They eloped rather than submit to an arranged mating, yes. And in doing so, they upset a very careful balance of power. Kieran's voice was grim. Damon was the Northern Pack's beta at the time, cousin to your grandfather and next in line if your mother produced no heirs. When she fled with your father, he saw his opportunity. He staged a coup, I guessed, the pieces falling into place. A massacre, Kieran corrected, his tone hard. He waited until the winter solstice, when the pack gathered to celebrate the longest night. He and his loyalists struck while the moon was hidden behind clouds, slaughtering anyone who wouldn't submit to his rule. Your grandfather died defending the pack lands. Your mother and father were tracked down 3 months later. I swallowed hard. And killed. Kieran's silence was confirmation enough. I closed my eyes. Grief for parents I barely remembered washing over me anew. Your grandmother escaped with you that night, he continued after a moment. By the time my father, the Alpha King before me, learned what had happened, Damon had already consolidated his power. He claimed the coup was necessary, that your grandfather had grown weak, that the Northern Pack needed stronger leadership. And the Alpha King believed him? I asked incredulously. Kieran's expression was complicated. My father made decisions I would not have made. The politics between the 7 territories is delicate. Direct interference from the Alpha King is seen as overreach, undermining the autonomy each pack is granted. So Damon got away with murder. He was sanctioned. Territories reduced, tributes increased. But yes, he remained Alpha. Kieran's jaw tightened. It was one of many points on which my father and I disagreed. I stood abruptly, pacing to the window that overlooked the nighttime gardens. And now? Where do you stand on Damon's rule? I've been Alpha King for 3 years, Kieran said, joining me at the window. In that time, I've gathered evidence of Damon's continued abuses. Wolves who disappear, neighboring packs harassed, territories encroached upon despite the sanctions. But you haven't moved against him, not without sufficient cause that would unite the other alphas behind me. His voice lowered. Not without a legitimate heir to the Northern Crescent bloodline to rally behind. I turned to face him, understanding dawning. That's why you recognized me at the celebration. You were looking for me. Not you specifically, he admitted. But rumors have persisted for years that a female heir survived the massacre. I've had people searching, quietly, for any trace. He reached out, his fingers brushing against the crescent pendant. Then I saw this, around the neck of a supposedly mute servant girl, and I knew the rumors might be true. So I'm a political tool, I said, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. A convenient figurehead for your campaign against Damon. Kieran's eyes flashed dangerously. Is that what you think? What else should I think? You need a cause to unite the packs, and I'm it. You're far more than that, Lyra, he said, his voice dropping to a near growl. If all I wanted was a figurehead, I could have taken you from that pack house and announced your identity immediately. Instead, I brought you here, protected you, trained you. To serve your purposes, to prepare you for what's coming. His control slipped, power rolling off him in waves that made the air thicken around us. Damon won't stop hunting you, even if I wanted to keep you hidden away here forever, which I don't. He would eventually discover who you are. The only path forward is for you to reclaim your birthright, to be strong enough to stand against him. His words hit me with the force of truth. I'd spent 10 years hiding, surviving, head down and voice silent. But survival wasn't enough anymore. My parents, my grandparents, my pack, they deserve justice. And if I fail? I whispered. Kieran's expression softened marginally. You won't. Not alone. A knock at the study door interrupted whatever else he might have said. Helena entered without waiting for a response, her customary composure fractured by urgency. Your Majesty, she said, the scouts have returned from the eastern border. They bring news that cannot wait. Kieran straightened, all traces of our heated exchange vanishing behind the mask of kingship. Bring them. Helena nodded and withdrew. Moments later, 2 wolves entered, a man and woman, both bearing the insignia of the Royal Scouts on their leather jackets. They bowed deeply to Kieran, then straightened, their eyes widening slightly as they noticed me. Report, Kieran commanded, gesturing for them to sit. We tracked movement along the eastern ridge as ordered, Your Majesty, the female scout began, her voice clipped and professional. For the past week, small groups have been gathering in the old caves beyond the Silver Falls. Wolves from different territories, moving in patterns designed to avoid detection. How many? Kieran asked. At least 50, possibly more, the male scout answered. They're well organized, communicating through underground channels. They all bear the same mark, a crescent moon, either tattooed or scarred into the skin. My breath caught. Wolves with the crescent mark, gathering in secret. And the leader? Kieran pressed, though his expression suggested he already knew the answer. The female scout hesitated. That's where it gets complicated, Your Majesty. They appear to be waiting for someone. They speak of the true heir, the Luna's return. They've established a sort of temporary pack structure, but it's clear they consider it provisional until their rightful Luna arrives. Kieran finished, his gaze shifting to me. The scouts followed his eyes, realization dawning on their faces as they took in my pendant. Is she... The male scout began, cutting himself off abruptly. She is, Kieran confirmed. Lyra of the Northern Crescent Pack. Granddaughter of Luna Queen Ara and Alpha Thorn, daughter of their only child Alara. The true heir to the Northern Territory. The scouts' reactions were immediate and startling. They rose and then knelt before me, heads bowed in a gesture of submission I'd never witnessed in my life. My Luna. They murmured in unison. I stood frozen, overwhelmed by the sudden deference. These weren't northern wolves. They bore the royal insignia, yet they knelt to me, as if I already wore the mantle of Luna Queen. Rise, I said, my Luna voice emerging unconsciously, gentle but firm. They obeyed instantly, eyes alight with something that looked unsettlingly like hope. There's more, Your Majesty, the female scout said, returning her attention to Kieran. Damon knows something is happening. He's doubled patrols along his borders, sent infiltrators into neighboring territories. There are rumors he's called in debts from allies in the southern packs. He's preparing for conflict, Kieran concluded. Yes, sir. And, she hesitated again. We intercepted a message. Damon has put a price on information about any female wolf matching certain characteristics. White fur in wolf form, possibly bearing a crescent mark. He doesn't have a name, but he's looking specifically for a young wolf with ties to the old northern bloodline. Ice washed through my veins. Damon was hunting me more actively than ever. How did he know to look for me now, after all this time? I asked. Kieran's expression darkened. Someone from your old pack must have connected the dots after I took you. Perhaps Darius, your former alpha. Or Rena, I murmured, remembering the Hedbetta's daughter who'd always watched me with suspicious eyes. She never believed I was truly mute. Regardless, Kieran said, our timeline has accelerated. If Damon is searching this actively, we cannot afford to wait. He turned to the scouts. Double the watches on all borders. I want to know the moment any of Damon's wolves cross into royal territory. They nodded and withdrew, leaving Kieran and me alone once more. What happens now? I asked, the weight of my heritage suddenly heavier than the 10 years of silence I'd carried before. Kieran's eyes met mine, resolve hardening his features. Now, little wolf, we answer the call of your people. We go east, to the wolves who've kept faith with the crescent moon. It's time for you to become what you were born to be, Luna Queen of the Northern Crescent Pack. The title I'd hidden from for a decade now loomed before me, no longer a distant possibility, but an imminent reality. I'm not ready, I whispered. Kieran's hand found mine, his touch unexpectedly gentle for one who carried so much power. None of us are ever ready for destiny, Lyra. We simply rise to meet it when it calls. Dawn broke cold and clear as we prepared to depart for the eastern mountains. The journey would take 2 days, first by car to the edge of royal territory, then on foot through the wilderness beyond, where roads gave way to ancient forest paths, known only to wolves who remembered the old ways. Kieran had selected a small group to accompany us, 4 of his most trusted warriors, the 2 scouts who'd brought news of the gathering crescent wolves, and Dr. Marcus, whose medical skills might be needed among refugees who had survived for years in hiding. I stood in my chambers, dressed in practical traveling clothes, sturdy pants, layers of shirts topped with a fur-lined jacket, and boots made for both human feet and the transition to wolf paws during shifts. At my throat, my grandmother's pendant gleamed in the early light. A soft knock preceded Helena's entrance. The housekeeper carried a small wooden box inlaid with silver. His Majesty asked me to bring this to you before your departure, she said, her usual austerity softened by something like respect. Since the scouts had knelt before me 2 days ago, there had been a subtle shift in how the palace staff regarded me. Less curiosity, more deference. She placed the box in my hands. It was lighter than it looked, carved from pale wood with the crescent moon motif repeated around its edges. I opened it carefully to find a circlet of twisted silver nested on blue velvet. Smaller and more delicate than Kieran's royal circlet, it was designed to rest across the forehead. A crescent moon at its center that would sit between the wearer's brows. The Luna's crown, Helena said softly. "It has been in the royal vault since your grandmother visited this palace 30 years ago. She wore it when addressing the Council of Alphas." My fingers hovered over the circlet, not quite daring to touch it. "It was hers?" "It belongs to the Luna Queen of the Northern Pack," Helena corrected. "It has waited for its rightful owner to return." She paused, then added with uncharacteristic gentleness, "As have many things." I lifted the circlet carefully. It was lighter than it appeared. The silver warmed to the touch as if it had absorbed the heat of my hands instantly. When I placed it on my brow, it settled as if made for me, the crescent moon cool against my skin. Helena's breath caught. "Now you look the part," she murmured, almost to herself. Before I could respond, another knock came at the door. This time it was Kieran, dressed similarly to me in practical traveling clothes, though he still wore his simple silver circlet. He stopped short when he saw me, something flashing in his eyes that I couldn't quite interpret. "The crown suits you," he said after a moment. "It always has, even when you didn't know it existed." Helena bowed slightly and withdrew, leaving us alone. "Are you ready?" Kieran asked. A week ago I might have said no, but my training had progressed rapidly. My wolf and I reforging the connection 10 years of separation had weakened. My Luna voice grew stronger daily, and with it, a certainty I'd never experienced before. "Yes," I said, the single syllable resonating with quiet power. His lips curved in approval. "Then let's not keep your people waiting any longer." The journey to the edge of royal territory passed in tense silence. Our convoy, 2 unmarked SUVs with dark windows, moved swiftly down mountain roads. Kieran beside me in the back seat, his warriors vigilant for any signs of threat. We spoke little, each lost in preparation for what lay ahead. By mid-afternoon, we reached the border of royal lands, marked by an ancient stone arch carved with wolves and moon phases. Beyond it stretched wild territory, a buffer zone between the organized packlands, technically under royal protection, but largely uninhabited except by lone wolves and small nomadic groups. "We continue on foot from here," Kieran announced as we exited the vehicles. "The eastern caves are a half-day's run for a wolf, longer if we encounter trouble." The shift came easier now, after days of practice. Within moments, our party had transformed, 9 wolves standing where humans had been seconds before. Kieran's wolf form was magnificent, larger than the others, black as midnight, with eyes the same storm gray as his human form. My white fur stood out starkly against the others, the crescent mark on my shoulder visible to all. We moved as one unit, Kieran and I at the center, the others forming a protective formation around us. The forest welcomed us, ancient pines creating a cathedral of green above our heads. My wolf reveled in the freedom, in the scents and sounds of wilderness after years of confinement. For hours, we ran. The rhythmic pad of paws on forest floor, the synchronization of breath and movement, created a meditation of sorts. In wolf form, concern seemed simpler, more immediate: safety, pack, territory. The complex politics of human existence faded beneath more primal imperatives. As dusk approached, I became aware of a subtle change. Scents on the wind carried messages my wolf understood instinctively. Territorial markers, but not aggressive ones. Welcoming ones. We were being watched, tracked by wolves who recognized us not as threats but as kin. Kieran sensed it too. A low rumble in his throat communicated caution to the group. We slowed, moving more deliberately now. At the crest of a ridge overlooking a valley cut through by a silver ribbon of river, we paused. Below, nearly hidden among ancient rock formations, I could make out the entrances to caves, the gathering place the scouts had described. A howl rose from the valley, a single wolf's voice carrying a message of greeting and question. Without conscious thought, I answered, my own howl splitting the twilight. The Luna's call, distinctive and powerful, echoed across the valley. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Dozens of howls rose in answer, a chorus of voices pledging allegiance to the crescent moon, to the Luna who had finally returned. Beside me, Kieran huffed softly, the wolf equivalent of approval. Then he led our descent into the valley, toward the wolves who had kept faith for 10 years. As we approached the caves, wolves emerged. cautious at first, then with growing confidence as they spotted my white fur, the crescent mark. They formed a pathway, heads lowered in respect, allowing us passage to the largest cave entrance where 3 wolves stood waiting. We shifted back to human form, the transformation rippling through our group. The gathered wolves did the same, revealing men and women of various ages, all bearing the crescent mark somewhere on their bodies, tattoos, scars, pendants similar to mine. The 3 who had waited at the cave entrance approached. An older man with silver-streaked hair and hard eyes that softened as they fell on me. A woman about my mother's age would have been, her face bearing a scar that ran from temple to jaw. Between them, a young man perhaps a few years older than me, with features that triggered a strange sense of familiarity. "Luna Lyra," the older man said, his voice thick with emotion. "After all this time, you know me?" I asked, startled by the recognition. "I knew your grandmother," he said. "I was captain of the Northern Guard before the fall. Thorn was my alpha and my friend." He knelt before me, fist over heart. "Garrick, at your service once more." The woman joined him in kneeling. "Elena, healer to the Northern Pack. I delivered you into this world, little Luna. I never thought I'd live to see you take your rightful place." My heart constricted at their words, at the devotion that had sustained them through years of exile and hiding. The young man remained standing, his eyes fixed on mine with an intensity that was almost unnerving. "You look like her," he said quietly. "Like your mother." "Who are you?" I asked, that strange sense of familiarity increasing. "Don't you recognize your own cousin?" A sad smile touched his lips. "Though I suppose you wouldn't. You were only 7 when we last saw each other. I'm Ethan, son of your mother's brother Callum, my uncle," I whispered, memories stirring. "A laughing man who had lifted me high, who had brought me presents from his travels, killed in the coup," Ethan confirmed, grief briefly shadowing his features. "Along with my mother and sister, I survived only because I was away, training with the Eastern Ridge Pack as part of an exchange. Family. After so many years believing myself alone, the last of my bloodline, to discover kin, however distant, was overwhelming." Kieran stepped forward then, drawing the attention of the gathered wolves. "How many have answered the crescent call?" he asked Garrick. 63 so far," the former guard captain replied. "More arrive daily as word spreads through the old networks. Survivors of the original Northern Pack, their children, allies from neighboring territories who remember the old alliance with the Crescent Wolves." "And what of Damon?" Kieran pressed. "Has he caught wind of this gathering?" Garrick and Elena exchanged glances. "His scouts probe the borders," Elena said, "but so far, the ancient protections of these caves have kept us hidden. They were sacred grounds to the first wolf packs, warded against those with ill intent. Those protections won't hold forever," Ethan added grimly, "especially if someone betrays our location." "Can these wolves fight?" Kieran asked, his voice low enough that only those closest could hear. "Some," Garrick acknowledged. "The younger ones have training. Those of us who survived the fall have experience. But we're not an army, Your Majesty. We're refugees, survivors. You're the Northern Crescent Pack," I said, finding my voice at last. "You kept faith when all seemed lost. You remembered who you were, who we are together." My words carried across the gathering, the Luna voice infusing them with power that straightened spines and lifted chins. These were my people, wounded, scattered, but unbroken. "We need more than faith and memory to stand against Damon," Ethan cautioned, though his eyes shone with something like hope as he looked at me. "He has numbers, territory, and the support of Southern alphas who profit from his rule. He doesn't have legitimacy," Kieran countered. "Nor does he have the Alpha King's support." He turned to address the gathered wolves. "For 10 years, Damon has ruled through terror and bloodshed. He has broken pack law, violated territory boundaries, and hunted innocent wolves whose only crime was loyalty to their true alpha. As Alpha King, I say this ends now." A murmur ran through the crowd, surprise, excitement, trepidation all mingled together. "Tonight, we rest and plan," Kieran continued. "Tomorrow we begin preparations in earnest. Damon's reckoning approaches, and when it comes, the Northern Crescent Pack will rise again under its rightful Luna. All eyes turned to me, expectant, hopeful. The weight of their faith pressed heavier than the silver circlet on my brow. These wolves had risked everything to answer the Crescent call. They looked to me not just for leadership, but for salvation, for the restoration of all they had lost. "I am not my grandmother," I said, my Luna voice carrying to every ear. "Nor my mother, nor my grandfather. I have lived in shadows while you kept the faith in daylight. I have been silent while you spoke the truth of what was stolen from us." I touched the pendant at my throat, drawing strength from it. "But I am of their blood, and I carry their legacy. The crescent moon has waned, but it never disappeared completely. Now it waxes again, growing stronger with each of you who stands with us." I looked around at these wolves who had kept faith, who had borne the crescent mark when it meant death to do so. Damon believes he destroyed the Northern Crescent Pack. He's about to learn how wrong he was. 3 days of preparation followed our arrival at the Eastern Caves. Warriors trained under Garrick and Kieran's guidance. Healers organized supplies under Elena's direction, and scouts maintained constant vigilance along the perimeter of our temporary territory. Each day more wolves arrived, drawn by the Luna call that had spread through ancient networks of loyalty. By the third evening, our numbers had grown to nearly 100. Still far fewer than Damon's forces. But these were wolves fighting for home, for justice, for the restoration of what had been wrongfully taken. I spent much of my time with Ethan, learning the history I'd been denied. Stories of our family, our pack, traditions that had been maintained in secret for a decade. He became my bridge to a heritage I'd suppressed along with my voice. "The Luna Queen was always more than just the Alpha's mate," Ethan explained as we walked the perimeter of our makeshift camp. "She was the heart of the pack, the connection to our deeper nature, to the moon itself. My grandmother never had time to teach me any of this," I said, watching a group of young wolves training in a clearing below. "She focused on keeping us hidden, on survival." "She did what was necessary," Ethan acknowledged. "But now you need more than survival skills. You need to understand what you're fighting to reclaim." That evening, a council gathered in the main cave: Kieran, Garrick, Elena, Ethan, the Royal Scouts, and myself. Maps were spread across a rough stone table, territory boundaries marked in red ink. "Our scouts report increased activity along Damon's borders," Garrick said, pointing to the northern territory that had once been my family's home. "He's calling in allies from the southern packs, offering territory concessions in exchange for support." "He knows something's coming," Kieran observed, his expression grim. "The question is whether he knows exactly what, or who." "We can't wait much longer," Elena warned. "Each day increases the risk of discovery." "We're not ready," Garrick countered. "Half our wolves haven't seen battle, and those who have are still recovering from years in exile." The debate continued. Strategies proposed and rejected. Risks weighed against necessities. I listened silently, the weight of decision pressing down on me. These wolves had gathered for me, risked everything on the promise of my return. Whatever path we chose, their lives hung in the balance. "What do you think, cousin?" Ethan asked, his voice cutting through the debate. All eyes turned to me. I studied the map, tracing the boundaries of what had once been my home. "If we wait for perfect readiness, we'll wait forever," I said finally. "But rushing into Damon's territory without advantage would be suicide." I looked up, meeting Kieran's gaze across the table. "We need to draw him out, away from his stronghold, away from the bulk of his forces." "And how do we do that?" Garrick asked skeptically. A plan was forming in my mind, dangerous and bold, with something he wants more than territory or power. I touched the crescent mark on my pendant. "With me." The response was immediate and vehement. "Absolutely not," Kieran growled, power rolling off him in waves. "Out of the question," Garrick agreed, for once aligned with the Alpha King. "It's too dangerous," Elena added, concern etching her features. Only Ethan remained silent, studying me with thoughtful eyes. "Hear me out," I insisted, my Luna voice cutting through their protests. For 10 years, Damon has hunted any trace of the Northern Crescent bloodline. He fears what I represent, a legitimate challenge to his rule. If he learns I've returned, that I've gathered supporters, he'll throw everything he has at crushing you, Kieran finished, his jaw tight with tension. Yes, I agreed, but on ground of our choosing, not his. And while his attention is fixed on me, the bulk of our forces can move against his weakened defenses. Silence fell as they considered my proposal. It was Ethan who finally spoke. It could work, he said quietly, but it would require perfect timing, flawless execution, and it would put you at tremendous risk, Lyra. What's the alternative? I challenged. A frontal assault against superior numbers? A prolonged siege that gives him time to gather more allies? Or do we simply disperse again, return to hiding for another decade? The hard truth of my words settled over the council. We had no easy options, no guaranteed path to victory. If, and I emphasize if, we were to consider this, Kieran said, each word measured and reluctant. How would we ensure your safety? Damon won't hesitate to kill you the moment he has you in his grasp. He won't kill me immediately, I countered. He'll want to make an example of me, to prove his dominance over the last of the Crescent bloodline. You can't know that, Kieran argued, frustration evident in his tone. I know how alphas like him think, I replied. 10 years watching from the shadows teaches you something about power and those who abuse it. The debate continued late into the night, the plan refined, contingencies developed, risks assessed and reassessed. By dawn, a strategy had emerged. Dangerous, certainly, but with the potential to succeed where direct confrontation would surely fail. 3 days, Kieran finally conceded, though his displeasure remained evident. We need 3 days to position our forces properly, I nodded, relief and apprehension mingling in my chest. 3 days. As the council dispersed, Kieran caught my arm, drawing me aside. I don't like this, he said, his voice low enough that only I could hear. Using you as bait for a monster like Damon goes against every instinct I have. As Alpha King or as a man? I asked quietly. His storm-gray eyes held mine, both. Something shifted between us, as it had in the chamber of the Moonstone. The connection that had sparked since our first meeting deepened, strengthened by shared purpose and growing trust. I need to do this, I said. Not just for the pack, but for myself. 10 years of hiding, of silence. I need to face him, to look into the eyes of the wolf who destroyed my family. Kieran's expression softened marginally. I understand the need for justice, Lyra. But I won't lose you to get it. You won't. I promised, more conviction in my voice than I truly felt. His hand lifted, fingers brushing against the silver circlet on my brow. The Luna crown has waited 10 years for your return, he murmured. It can wait a little longer for its triumph. The 3 days passed in a blur of preparation. Warriors positioned themselves strategically around Damon's territory, hidden in forests and mountains, waiting for the signal. Healers prepared for casualties. Scouts established communication routes, and I trained relentlessly, pushing the limits of both my wolf form and my Luna voice. On the morning of the 4th day, I stood at the edge of our camp, dressed in white, the traditional color of the Luna Queen. The silver circlet gleamed on my brow, my grandmother's pendant at my throat. No disguises, no hiding. For the first time in a decade, I would step into the light as who I truly was. Kieran approached, his own preparations complete. He would lead the main assault once Damon was drawn out, while Garrett commanded the forces that would accompany me as apparent protection. Just enough to be credible, but few enough to seem an irresistible target. Are you certain? Kieran asked one final time, his eyes searching mine. I nodded, no hesitation remaining. It's time to end this, one way or another. His hand found mine, fingers interlacing. Remember your training. Trust your wolf, your voice, and know that I'm coming for you, no matter what happens. The promise in his words carried more meaning than either of us was ready to acknowledge. This was more than alliance now, more than shared purpose. Something deeper had taken root between us, something neither time nor distance could sever. Our small party departed at noon. Myself, Ethan, and 6 warriors chosen for both skill and loyalty. We traveled openly along the old northern road, making no attempt to conceal our presence. Word would spread quickly, carried by the eyes that we knew watched from the forest. By nightfall, we had reached the border of what had once been Northern Crescent territory. A river marked the boundary, its silver waters rushing between steep banks. On the far side stood a party of wolves, Damon's border patrol, alerted to our approach. "Hold," called their leader, a broad-shouldered wolf with cold eyes. "This territory belongs to Alpha Damon. State your business." I stepped forward, the circlet catching the last light of day. "I am Lyra, granddaughter of Alpha Thorn and Luna Queen Ara, daughter of their heir Alara. I've come to claim what is rightfully mine." The patrol leader's eyes widened, recognition and disbelief warring in his expression. "The northern bloodline was extinguished," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Clearly not," Ethan replied coldly, stepping to my side. "Inform your Alpha that the true heir has returned. The Northern Crescent Pack rises again." The patrol conferred hurriedly, then 2 members broke away, racing toward the heart of the territory, toward Damon. The trap was set. "He'll come himself," I said quietly to Ethan as we made camp just beyond the border. "His pride won't allow anything else." "And when he does?" Ethan asked, checking his weapons with practiced ease. "We give him exactly what he expects, an overconfident heir with minimal protection, ready to be crushed." I smiled thinly. "Until we don't." Dawn broke misty and cold, the forest eerily silent around our camp. The birds had stopped singing, the small creatures of the underbrush gone still, nature itself holding its breath in anticipation. They came with the rising sun, a force of 30 wolves led by a massive gray-black figure I recognized instantly, though I'd only glimpsed him once before. The night of the celebration at my old pack house. Damon. The usurper who had murdered my family, stolen my birthright, and driven me into a decade of hiding. So, his voice carried across the clearing, deep and contemptuous. The rumors were true. A little crescent cub survived after all. I stood to face him, Ethan and our warriors flanking me. "No cub," I corrected, my Luna voice strong and clear. "The rightful heir to the Northern Pack." Damon laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "Rightful heir? Your grandfather was weak, your mother a traitor who abandoned her duty. The Northern Pack needed strength, not sentiment. Is that what you tell yourself to justify massacre?" I challenged, taking a step forward. "That you were serving the Pack by slaughtering its Alpha and Luna, by hunting down every wolf loyal to them?" His eyes narrowed, cold calculation replacing mockery. "You've been hidden a long time, little heir. Protected by the Alpha King himself, I hear." His gaze swept over our small party. "Though he seems to have abandoned you when it mattered most." "I fight my own battles," I replied, chin lifting. "Starting with reclaiming what you stole." Bold words from a wolf who spent her life running. Damon signaled, and his forces spread out, encircling our position. "I'll be merciful, and make this quick. Unlike what I have planned for those traitors gathering in the eastern caves." My heart stuttered. He knew about the caves, about the gathered crescent wolves. "Yes," he said, reading my expression with cruel satisfaction. "Did you think your little rebellion went unnoticed? My forces are moving against your supporters even as we speak. By nightfall, the Northern Crescent bloodline will truly be extinct." It was a lie. It had to be. Our scouts would have warned us of any large-scale movement, but the seed of doubt had been planted, exactly as Damon intended. "Enough talk," Ethan growled, stepping partially in front of me. "You face the rightful heir to the Northern Pack, backed by the authority of the Alpha King. Surrender now, or face the consequences." Damon's smile was all teeth. "I choose neither." He launched forward with shocking speed, shifting mid-leap into his wolf form, larger than any I'd seen besides Kieran's, gray-black fur bristling with aggression. Our warriors responded instantly, their own shifts flowing seamlessly as they moved to intercept. Chaos erupted around us. Wolf fought wolf, snarls and growls filling the clearing as Damon's superior numbers pressed in from all sides. Ethan shifted beside me, his tawny wolf form darting into the fray to engage a particularly large opponent heading toward me. This was the moment, the diversion we had planned. While Damon focused on capturing or killing me, Kieran's forces would be moving into position around his weakly defended stronghold. I needed to hold his attention just a little longer. I shifted into my white wolf form, the transformation fluid after days of intensive practice. Immediately, I sensed the change in the battlefield, Damon's wolves hesitating momentarily at the sight of a white wolf bearing the crescent mark. An echo of legends many had heard, but few believed. Taking advantage of their hesitation, I darted through an opening in their ranks, leading them away from my embattled companions. As expected, several broke off to pursue me, Damon himself at their head. Perfect. The more forces he committed to my capture, the fewer remained to defend his territory. I raced through familiar forest I hadn't seen in a decade, memories surfacing with each bound. Here, the stream where my father had taught me to fish. There, the meadow where my mother had gathered herbs. This was my home, and despite years of exile, my wolf remembered every path, every hidden trail. Behind me, Damon's growls grew closer. He was faster than I'd anticipated, his larger wolf form eating up the distance between us despite my head start. I pushed harder, lungs burning, muscles straining as I led him deeper into the forest, farther from his stronghold. A ravine appeared ahead, too wide to jump, too steep to descend quickly. I skidded to a halt, turning to face my pursuers as they fanned out, trapping me against the edge. Damon shifted back to human form, his eyes glittering with triumph. "Nowhere left to run, little heir," he taunted. "Shift back. I want you to face your end on 2 feet, as your grandfather did." I obeyed, the transformation slower now as fatigue set in. Standing before him in human form, the Luna crown still somehow on my brow, I straightened my spine and met his gaze without flinching. "My grandfather died protecting his pack," I said, my Luna voice carrying through the forest. "I live to reclaim it. Your pack is scattered, your supporters surrounded," Damon sneered. "Even now my forces are closing in on your pathetic gathering in the eastern caves." "Are they?" I asked, a smile touching my lips despite the danger. "Or are they finding their own territory under attack while they chase shadows through the forest?" Doubt flickered across Damon's face, quickly replaced by rage. "It doesn't matter. Once you're dead, any claim to challenge my rule dies with you." He stepped closer, drawing a blade from his belt, silver-edged, designed to inflict wounds that even a wolf's healing couldn't quickly mend. "Any last words? Last of the crescent line?" I drew myself up to my full height, the Luna crown catching the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. "I am Lyra of the Northern Crescent Pack, granddaughter of Alpha Thorn and Luna Queen Ara. I reclaim my birthright and call judgment upon the usurper who stands before me." The words seemed to echo with more than my voice alone, as if the forest itself amplified them, carried them beyond our small clearing to every corner of the territory. Damon faltered, something like fear crossing his features for the first time. "Fancy words won't save you," he growled, raising the blade. A howl split the air, not from any of the wolves present, but from deeper in the forest. Then another joined it, and another, until the woods rang with the chorus of approaching wolves. Damon's head snapped up, his expression shifting from triumph to alarm. "What is this?" "The response to a Luna's call," I said quietly, as shapes began to materialize between the trees, wolves emerging from the forest in a circle around us, their eyes fixed on Damon with unmistakable hostility. Leading them was a midnight black wolf larger than all others, Kieran. The plan had worked perfectly. While Damon pursued me with his elite guard, Kieran's forces had swept through the territory, overwhelming the weakened defenses of his stronghold. Now they had him surrounded, cut off from retreat, his own territory lost while he chased the prize that had blinded him to all else. Damon's wolves shifted nervously, outnumbered and outflanked. Some began to back away, self-preservation overriding loyalty to an alpha who had led them into trap. "Hold," Damon commanded, but the alpha power in his voice had diminished, weakened by the presence of the Alpha King and the rightful Luna heir standing united against him. Kieran shifted to human form, his silver circlet gleaming in his dark hair, power radiating from him in palpable waves. "Damon of the Northern Territory," he said, his voice carrying the full weight of his authority as Alpha King. "You stand accused of usurpation, of the murder of Alpha Thorn and Luna Queen Ara. of the persecution of innocent wolves loyal to the Crescent bloodline. How do you answer? I did what was necessary for the pack, Damon snarled, desperation edging his defiance now. Thorn was weak. His daughter refused her duty. The Northern Pack would have fallen without strong leadership. That wasn't your decision to make, I said, stepping forward. The pack had a rightful heir. You chose massacre over loyalty. The choice is now yours, Kieran continued. Submit to the judgment of the Pack Council or face challenge here and now. Damon's eyes darted between us, calculating his chances. His forces were deserting him, melting back into the forest as they recognized their alpha's impending fall. But surrender meant public humiliation, trial before the Council of Alphas, execution for his crimes. With a roar of rage, he lunged toward me, silver blade raised for a killing stroke. But I was ready. 10 years of suppressed anger, grief, and determination exploding in a surge of power as I shifted faster than I ever had before. My wolf met his attack head-on, teeth finding his forearm, forcing the blade away. We tumbled together, human and wolf locked in mortal combat. Blood, his or mine, I couldn't tell, stained my white fur as we rolled across the forest floor. For all his size and strength, Damon fought with the desperation of one who knew defeat meant death. But I fought with the accumulated rage of a decade, with the collective memory of every wolf who had suffered under his rule. When the opening came, I took it without hesitation. My jaws closed around his throat, teeth breaking skin, the metallic taste of blood filling my mouth. One bite, one moment of decision. Justice or mercy, vengeance or a new beginning. Around us, the forest fell silent, wolves from both sides watching as the fate of the Northern Territory hung in the balance. I released him, stepping back as he collapsed to the ground, hand clutching his wounded throat. Not a killing bite. He would live, but the scar would remain forever, a mark of defeat visible to every wolf who saw him. Shifting back to human form, I stood over him, the Luna crown steady on my brow. I am not you, I said, my voice carrying to every ear in the clearing. The Northern Crescent Pack does not rule through fear and bloodshed. Your life is spared, but your rule is ended. Kieran stepped forward, guards moving to secure Damon. By authority of the Alpha King, Damon is stripped of rank and territory. He will be held for judgment by the Council of Alphas, to answer for his crimes against the Northern Pack and violations of wolf law. As Damon was led away, defeated and diminished, the wolves of the forest began to approach cautiously. Some had served Damon, others had hidden their loyalty to the Crescent Moon, waiting for this day. All looked to me now, uncertainty and hope mingling in their expressions. I stood in the clearing where my life had changed forever, the white wolf with the crescent mark who had emerged from a decade of silence to reclaim her birthright. The Luna Queen returning to her pack. The Northern Crescent Pack rises again, I called, my Luna voice carrying through the trees, across streams and meadows, to every corner of the territory, not through conquest or cruelty, but through justice and restoration. Those who wish to join us in rebuilding what was broken, step forward. Those who cannot accept the return of the Crescent Moon are free to seek their path elsewhere. One by one, then in groups, wolves approached, some kneeling in submission, others simply inclining their heads in respect. Among them came familiar faces. Ethan, bloodied but triumphant. Garrick, leading a contingent of warriors from the eastern caves. Elena, already tending to the wounded. And beside me stood Kieran, the Alpha King who had recognized the silent servant girl as the heir to a legacy thought lost, who had given me back my voice, my wolf, my heritage. The Crescent has returned to the north, he said, his voice pitched for my ears alone. As it was meant to be. In the days that followed, we began the long process of rebuilding. The northern stronghold, my ancestral home, was reclaimed, its dark memories gradually replaced with new beginnings. Wolves who had scattered across the territories returned, bringing with them stories of survival, of keeping faith through the darkest times. A month after Damon's defeat, the Council of Alphas convened at Black Crest to witness two historic events. The first was Damon's formal judgment, stripped of rank, exiled from all 7 territories, a fate many considered worse than death for a wolf who had once ruled through fear. The second was my official recognition as Luna Queen of the restored Northern Crescent Pack. In the grand hall where alphas and their representatives gathered, I stood before Kieran as he placed the Luna crown upon my brow. Not as a temporary symbol, but as my rightful inheritance. The crescent returns to its rightful place, he declared, the traditional words carrying new meaning for both of us. That night, as celebration continued in the halls of Black Crest, Kieran and I slipped away to the moonstone chamber beneath the palace. The crystal glowed softly in the darkness, responding to our presence. What happens now? I asked, echoing the question I'd posed weeks earlier, when the path ahead had seemed impossible. Kieran's fingers intertwined with mine, that electric connection between us stronger than ever. Now, the hard part begins, he said honestly. Rebuilding a pack, healing old wounds, establishing your rule. And us? I asked. The question that had hung unspoken between us through battle and victory. His storm-gray eyes held mine. All pretense of distance gone. There hasn't been a true mating between an Alpha King and a Luna Queen in 15 generations, he said softly. Such an alliance would change the balance of the territories forever. Is that what you want? An alliance? His free hand rose to touch the crescent moon at the center of my crown. I want the wolf who defied an Alpha King's command, who survived 10 years in silence, who faced her enemy with courage when others would have faltered. He stepped closer, until I could feel the heat of him, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. I want you, Lyra. Not for politics or power or legacy, but for the fire that burns beneath your skin, for the spirit that could never truly be silenced. The truth of his words resonated with something deep within me, the part that had recognized him from the first, that had trusted him against all caution and experience. A voice can be a gift or a prison, I murmured, recalling my grandmother's final warning. Choose wisely when to use yours. And what does your voice choose now? Kieran asked, his eyes never leaving mine. In answer, I closed the distance between us, my lips finding his in a kiss that felt inevitable, as if 10 years of silence had been leading to this moment of perfect understanding. The Luna and the Alpha King, the crescent moon and the midnight wolf, finally aligned as they were meant to be. I choose to never be silent again, I whispered against his lips. I choose to stand beside you, not behind you. I choose a future where the Northern Crescent Pack rises stronger than before, where no wolf lives in fear of speaking truth to power. His arms tightened around me, a promise without words. Whatever came next, the challenges of rebuilding, the politics of the territories, the inevitable conflicts that would test our resolve, we would face it together. The Alpha King and his Luna Queen, bound by something stronger than tradition or duty. The white wolf had found her voice at last, and the crescent moon was rising once more over the northern territory, its light a beacon of hope for all who had kept faith through the darkness.